Hello and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is a podcast or a video series, depending on your platform of choice, which contains a series of conversations between me, Mike Hutchinson, a designer of miniature games, and this guy, Glenn Ford, also a designer of miniature games. On this podcast, this last few episodes, we have been on a journey discovering everything that we can about Kickstarter and how best I might not horribly fail in my first stumbling steps onto that platform. Because I've got a game called Space Gits that I've decided to take to Kickstarter in order to seek funding to make a beautiful hard copy, real world physical edition of it. And take it from where it currently lives, which is a PDF that you can download from itch, and put it out into the world. The last conversation we had was about the wonderful world of promotion and marketing, and we covered a bunch of things that you can do without dipping your hand into your pocket and giving people money to sell your stuff. Just all the things that you can do kind of organically off your own back to generate some buzz around your Kickstarter campaign before and during. In this next part of the conversation, we are going to talk about how you can spend money and whether you should spend money. And we're not total experts here and haven't done all the things, but we're gonna stand on this pedestal and thump our whatevers anyway. So you'll just have to deal with that. Now, I'm going to start with a minor sort of position that I hold, which is that since I started this racket as being a independent miniatures designer, at the start of going fully independent, I sort of decided to enshrine as a principle for myself something that I'd already been doing a fair bit anyway. It sort of started as early as the initial Gaslands beta testing. But I've made a decision that I'm going to share what I'm working on as early as I am working on it, pretty much. And I'm going to show all the sort of grubby early bits and in between bits and half finished bits, and I'm going to tell you about my games long before you can actually buy them from me, which is in marketing terms very bad practice. You shouldn't tell someone about something unless you can actually get them to buy it then, because otherwise they'll know about it, they'll get excited about it, they can't buy it, and then they'll sort of have already got excited about it and forget about it and never get excited about it again. That is the law of the land when it comes to marketing. It's not strictly true because you have a whole like building awareness before you get to conversion. Whatever, we aren't going to get into the management theory of marketing too much. But what I have decided is that it's much more valuable for me to build a slow, organic, word of mouth sort of accretive understanding that there is something cool that I am working on, and it's part of my sort of buzzing milieu of exciting cool things that I'm working on, and that when it becomes real you're like, oh cool, that thing that I have watched sort of sprout from a tiny acorn is now a medium-sized like young sycamore, and maybe one day it will be a mighty oak, somehow transcending species boundaries, but whatever. This metaphor is irrelevant. What's relevant is that the reason I've decided to share early, share often, and share before you can give me money is that the alternative is having a splashy marketing launch for something, keeping it under wraps and then going, huzzah, it's here, everybody get excited and buy it right now. And that requires mostly quite a lot of money to make one of those happen, and a lot of organization, but mostly a lot of money. And I don't have the kind of money required to land any sort of impact on the kind of direct marketing platforms like Facebook ads, YouTube ads, places where I would exchange money for impressions of my advert. It's just really hard for me to gather enough cash to have any kind of impact. And that's because there are enormous marketing budgets out there for enormous companies that are spending all of this money and using all of the real estate. And so in order to have any kind of competitive battle in that, you have to spend really quite a lot of money, and I don't have that sort of money. So I've decided to pick a different battle and not go after that. And so that's my sort of like opening that's my opening rant of like why I'm probably not going to spend very much, if any, money on digital advertising. But there are people around me who are trying to convince me that might be a position worth reconsidering. I don't know that Glenn is going to be one of them, but let's talk spending money on advertising and some war stories there.
A really, really quick thing is if you think there are people currently trying to convince you to spend money on digital advertising, wait until you launch a Kickstarter. There are going to be a lot of people. I'll tell you one very quick rule I think is worth considering is that anybody who reaches out to you when you have got a running Kickstarter asking you to spend money on their advertising thing, ignore that person immediately.
Mm,
That person is not a good or useful person, and they arrive like absolute locusts when you launch a Kickstarter. And I'll tell you the main reason I think that is that the people that are like proper and legit, like Jellup and Backakit and whatever else it happens to be, they don't reach out to you at that point. They just sit there going, "You know who we are. You're
mm,
aware of us. We were there before, and we're there after." The people who are going to reach out to you when you've got your Kickstarter running know that you're potentially in a tailspin where you're going, how can I get man numbers to go up? How can I, and
mm,
they're frankly borderline predatory. So just discount those guys immediately,
mm.
and they will spam the living hell out of you when the Kickstarter's going. Um, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying there, and like I say, following on from the last conversation, I think it's a big part of being an independent that you are building a following of yourself as much as the game, and that's an ongoing thing. I do think that there are two different sort of, I don't know, whatever vectors of marketing, where there's the thing where you're getting people who are following along, who pay attention to the game itself and the way it develops and who you are, and those people don't need there to be something that they can immediately like go to and follow a call to action for. And then there are the people that you get from paid advertising. And if you are going to do paid advertising, absolutely 100% you need to have a thing that immediately when they see that paid advert they can go to and in one way or another sort of give you money, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a kickstarting back, whether it's a website that they can direct order from, wherever it happens to be. And I do think that is like that is one of the big differences is that if you put money into an advert, that advert I think needs to be directly attached to a thing that pays out. I know people that pay money for adverts in order to get like followers on, Kickstarter, wherever it happens to be. And every person I've ever talked to who's done it has said, yeah, it did I did not get I lost money on it. I definitely lost money on it. There's no two ways around it. I've never seen anybody, even who was a fanatical fan of doing that, be like, oh no, I made my money back. Or even the people who keep doing it, like, oh no, I lose money on any every time. I just don't.
Yeah, and so I think this is where I'll get like a little bit technical on the marketing side and introduce influencer marketing. So we'll keep it simple. There are two stages to marketing in general. One is making someone aware that something exists, and the other is converting them into a buyer. There are a couple of other steps in the middle if you want to get technical. But anyway, awareness marketing, like making people aware that your thing exists, like that has always been the big money spend. Like you have to
Mm,
hit big audiences so lots of potential people are aware of it, because they're not going to be interested. They just needs to get lodged in their brain that like a shop called Asda does exist.
mm,
And it seems to be, concerned with price. I'm concerned with price. All right, Asda, I'll remember you. But like, what I think is true for me, and I suspect will be true for many people watching this, is that like I don't have anything like the money required to
mm,
deliver the sort of audience required to deliver an awareness campaign. What I could do is convince or potentially even pay a content creator that exists in the niche that's relevant to my game to pick it up and kind of rebroadcast my message that I'm making a game and that game is exciting and what might be exciting about it. And that I think feels to me like, you know, the closest to, that might be during the campaign, it might be just before the campaign, so it might have a connection to like you can actually go and back the thing right away, but it's slightly different to like running a Facebook ad where the whole thing is a button that just goes back this now. So I think this interim sort of service is to a degree best served by other humans who make content getting excited about your thing, and then they can broadcast that to their audience of people who are hopefully relevant to you.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, yeah, influencer, whatever it is, preview, review, sort of marketing processes. I think is it again. It is a tricky one, and it's difficult in relation to paid pre-reviews,
Hmm.
and people have mixed feelings about them and how they are presented, and it is obviously it's definitely a thing that has controversy attached to it.
Hmm.
You know, that if something is presented as a review but it was paid for, you know,
I think so. One thing that I think is really
ethical.
good in the tabletop space
Hmm.
is, again, it's not completely without controversy, but there is a thing that we can do that other products can't necessarily all do, which is like a set of like explaining how to play the game, or in the case of a miniatures game, like getting excited about the hobby element. Like there is a genuine thing that needs to be explained or can be shared that is not necessarily
Yeah,
reading the game. But I mean, even here we have problems where I might search for the game's name or come across a channel, a video rather, on a channel that I'm already following, and it won't immediately be clear to me whether this video is here because someone just got excited about something or because, Mike paid them to make a video.
yeah, hopefully how to play videos and things of that nature that give no specific like opinions on the quality of the game
Mm,
being paid for products is as close to like ethically clean paying for a video that you're probably going to get to.
right. Yeah.
They're going to explain it in an enthusiastic and enthused manner.
Yeah. I paid them to be enthusiastic for
That's
sure.
their job, but hopefully, look, this is this is an area that I see constant discussions about, in various forums, and it is a tricky one. What I would say is that there are a lot of free content creators out there. There are people who you can find who will do a video about your game for free, and I'm a strong believer that it's worth supporting those people. Now, a lot of those people have smaller reaches, which is part of the reason that they have to do videos for free.
Mm,
And a lot of them are hoping that they'll one day get an audience big enough that they can then start charging. Um, but I think like the most important thing to me of a review, and it's not necessarily super part of this conversation, is having a video on the Kickstarter page showing, look, another human being played this game who
right.
isn't me and didn't go, well, this is just a lump of blancmange. I can't get through it.
Mhm.
Rather than, which I think is an important part of marketing and presenting the game.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because I think like I was almost gonna go into this as part of the first party, like the stuff that you're doing to promote yourself, like showing the game, whether it's physically in terms of the preview copies or just showing how it works and how it's played, is super important. It seems to me to be super important.
Hmm.
And if you can get another human to show it, then that's double bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas, like, paying for an influencer's following, I think hopefully, you know, I would advocate for doing that in a way that is no way presented as a review or preview or a thing where the person says this game is good or bad. That's my personal position, and like,
Mhm.
people are going to find their own place in that between like how enthusiastic they want to pay for the person to be doing it.
So
Um,
so like slightly more mercenary than that, but potentially like equally ethically clean, is to work with an influencer, whether you pay them or not, and say, look, I want to be involved in one of the videos that you've got coming up already that sort of nestles in my niche. And I want to be like talked about at some point in the first minute or whatever. So, for example, that I might go and find I might go and find someone talking about, you know, classic orc models, and that might be one of the things they talk about on their channel. And then I'd be like, well, hey, could you do a thing about like classic orc models, but then also mention the Space Gits
Yeah.
Kickstarter in like a very clear sort of, this is the advertiser sponsorship section,
Well,
but it's like super relevant to the content and their audience.
yeah, generally, hopefully, the virtuous circle is that content creators are hungry for content. And that if you turn up saying, you know, look, you can interview me about a game, that's content for you. I do have a following. And if the person you're finding is around your level of following, then there's a mutual benefit to your followers, you know, following their thing and their followers following your
I
thing.
love that in the paid marketing section, we're still finding hacks to not pay, because getting interviews on podcasts and other people's channels is a number one top tip.
Yeah,
I do
absolutely.
that like an absolute, like, yeah, like an utter mercenary. I'll show
So
up on anyone's podcast.
given that this is meant to be the thing about paying for stuff, and
Yeah.
given that one of the questions I most often get asked is like brass tacks numbers, what's fair and what's reasonable,
Yep.
I would say like so in the past I've reached out to various influencers just to find out, you know, do they do things for free and etc etc. I have a web
Spreadsheet.
spreadsheet that's mainly about board game reviewers. I'll put a link to it, but that
Mm.
tells you that that has like a whole list of people and whether they'll do Kickstarters, whether they charge, what they charge for. But long story short, a couple of years ago now, I Rado runs through it, one of the biggest board game review channels, happened to reach out to me to ask about a game that I was doing. I said, you know, yeah, sure, and he mentioned his fee. And that was when I was like, you know, never mind, don't worry about it. I'm just saying
Mm.
to say, okay, so his fee was $500.
Hmm.
And he is one of the biggest influencer channels out there. You know, I've heard of people asking way more than that, and I've heard of people asking like less than that for various reasons. But I just want to say, if you're looking at influencer with a good following, that's about a ballpark price that seems, having spoken to a few other influencers, to be a reasonable like industry standard still at the moment. Um,
So the price is interesting because the price only matters
hmm,
in relationship to your average backer. So if your average backer is $100, because that's the way you've structured your campaign, and you find an influencer with a decent, you know, audience, and they have an acceptable conversion rate, then you can figure out like what
yeah,
you think the right number is, for that spend to be worthwhile. Because ultimately, that's all spending money on marketing is. It's like
yeah.
taking a gamble that you make more money than you spend.
Absolutely, and so yeah, so this is where we'll, you know, we're going to start getting things like a ROI, return on investment, and you know, investment levels. And so, okay, so going on from that, you know, I've had conversations with, for example, Jellup, who 100% like proper legit, they're not trying to rip you off or screw you over, and the representative from Jellup was brilliant, very clear and open, and like we had a discussion at the end of it. I said, look, there's no possible way I can make the ROI work, and he was like, good, fair enough. I don't want to be selling you a product that can't possibly, you know, so I have no bad things to say about them. You know, they're doing you know, what they do, but they will set out, so the way it will work if you go to one of the big like advertisers like Jellup is that they'll say, okay, what we want to do is we will have a minimum amount of money we want you to give us before like the campaign launches or anything. So for Jellup, the absolute bare minimum was £1,000,
Okay.
like opening thing. Then you will set an ROI level for the advertising that they'll do, and that's where you'll basically say, for every dollar I give you, I require X many dollars of sales back.
Mm.
And if that gets hit, you are allowed to just take more of my money and spend it and spend it and spend it and spend it.
Right,
So
with
I'm
the logic
saying,
here being that at this point you're just making money. So
Yeah,
it's foolish not to put more money into that strategy because it's working.
exactly. I will set a level, and that level of ROI is basically me buying money
Mm.
through you as a middleman. And if they hit that ROI, they'll just keep taking more money off you, and you'll be like, well, great, take as much of my money as I have available, because every penny you take back to me, take from me, will come back, x fold. Now, obviously, marketing people will be like, well, if you pay $5 and get $5 1 cent back, you should give us all of your money ever, because
Yeah.
you're just buying money. We then obviously have to go out and print a product, and we have overheads and profit margins. And you can sit down and you can talk to these people, and you can find out their highest, and they won't, again, if they're in any way responsible, they won't say to you, yeah, sure, whatever ROI you say, we could reach it. They'll go like, no. So Jellup was like, no, this is our maximum. We have never reached higher than this ROI ever.
Yeah.
You can set that as your ROI. We have reached it in the past, and again, they'll say things like, look, we can bring people to your page. We can't make them buy you. We can't make your page good, and we can't make your product worthwhile.
Yeah.
We can get people across, and the ROI is our like cut off, like barrier stopper, so that we won't just spend all your money.
And
like,
do they don't do anything to create the content? They're just placing the ads cleverly, right?
yeah. So, well, I mean, you can pay them to create adverts for you, and you can
Right.
give them like pictures and copy and etc, and they have graphic designers on staff, and they can make a lovely advert for you, and they can run A/B. So what you can do is you can put out two different adverts, and they can track which advert is doing better, and they'll throw out the one that is doing worse, and then you can give them a new A/B, and they'll keep doing that and run a little evolution, death cage battle between adverts for you.
Yeah,
So like,
you test different messages, you test different
yeah,
visuals, and you learn which one works, and you keep evolving towards the fittest advert.
absolutely. And so, but basically, what this boils down to is, there are hard numbers involved here, and you figure out what your actual profit margin is, and you figure out whether or not the ROI that they say they can reach will make sense and actually leave you with profit. And if you figure it out, where like with shipping, production, all that sort of stuff, there is a realistic ROI that still leaves you with like whatever, 50 cents out of the deal. And sure, I totally see the argument. It's like, then you may as well say to them, here's my checkbook, crack on, because everything you do is going to bring me in
Must
money.
be really tricky though, because there are non-linear breakpoints in costs that make this hard.
Absolutely. So again, the project that I mentioned previously, and I put a link to their update, Thirsty Sword Lesbians. As I say, they spent like 25 grand on advertising, and that was on the basis that, and that wasn't upfront. That was, they put whatever, let's say 5 grand up front, and they set their ROI, and then, and I think it was literally Jellup just went, well, we're hitting the ROI, so
Yeah.
crank open the floodgates and spend an extra 20 grand, which, the guys of Thirsty Sword Lesbians were very happy about, and their project did very, very well. But that's one of the things where it's like, they'll just keep going, the marketers, because they're making you money. And obviously, look, to my mind, marketing is a bit of a dark art as far as, my understanding of it goes. And my personal opinion on it is that, hopefully you have a set of skills that hopefully you are aware of what they are. And if your skill set doesn't include actually understanding paid marketing, my best advice is leave it the hell alone, because it's a bit of a third rail. It's possibly where the power is, and it's possibly where, people become millionaires. But if you don't know what you're doing with it, you can just get absolutely fried.
Yeah, and to put a less colorful point on that. You can spend quite a lot of money quite quickly without really getting any value for that money, and so that would be
Yeah,
sad.
absolutely. And like, and again, Jellup, people like that, the responsible ones will say, no, look, you're going to give us a certain amount of upfront money.
Yeah,
The guaranteed return on that upfront money is nothing.
yeah,
Potentially, you're giving us that money and we're spinning the roulette wheel and you will see zip from it.
yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
And
Uh,
those numbers do feel about right, because like when I was working in digital marketing in like a different industry in toys, like if you want to learn something, not even to like advertise something, but if you want to learn something about about how to market your product, you're looking at about $10,000. Like
hmm,
that's your minimum useful spend to get any data that you can do anything with. So
yeah,
here in Toy Tomy, tabletop land, like £1,000 might sound like a lot. As far as the digital marketing ecosystem is concerned, like it's not even real data.
yeah, absolutely. I'm on various discords with like small independent game designers, and there are people I consider to be, really, really tiny, like single person producers, and they talk about their advertising budgets, and it's like 5, 10 grand to be worth bothering to do.
Yeah,
And this is the thing, and it really does boil down to that. If you don't have an advertising budget of, I would say at least 5 grand, probably best to not spend money on advertising. That is
because
my,
the problem is that the way that digital advertising works is such that small amounts of money are just noise in the system, and they never gather any useful traction. So the smaller amounts of money, although they're smaller and therefore less risky to you, they're also basically just doing nothing because they haven't gathered enough traction to ping around the system in any meaningful way. So they are basically just all dud bullets up until a certain threshold point. And I think
yeah,
£5,000 sounds like about the right threshold where you actually start getting enough data to be able to actually spend that money in a way that it might do something.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's
But I
like,
mean, the dream is there, right? Like the dream is you make something wonderful, but not very many people know about it. And through the magic of money, lots of people see your wonder and go, "Wow, that's wonderful."
yeah,
I just currently believe that if I can find two or three excited humans to share that in a way that's like, they're broadcasting on their platforms of choice, and they can get excited about it, I feel like I can reach those 10 to 30,000 people in a much more cost-effective way,
yeah.
by investing in content creation or just befriending and getting people excited about it.
And I think it is important, and I try to stress this, is it's about what your goals are and what your level is. I do not think you're going to make 200 or 300 grand without spending, you know 10 grand on advertising. I
Yeah,
do think you can make 10 or 20 or 30 grand without paying any money on advertising. I think that because I've done it in the past, you
mm.
know um and it's like, well, what level are you aiming for? What is your goal? There is nothing wrong with making 30 grand selling games on Kickstarter. That is not a fail, in life.
Yeah, yeah,
And if
definitely.
if in order to potentially make 200 grand, you've got to spend 10 grand, particularly if you don't have 10,000 pounds available as an upfront spend. Well, it's nice to imagine it, but
Mm.
you know and
Yeah, definitely. I think one other thing, like from my perspective, one of the reasons that I'm tempted with Space Gits in a way that I haven't been tempted with anything before, is that I think the audience, like the keyword targeting for Space Gits, is kind of obvious. Like, um, Warhammer 40,000 has a massive audience, and a good chunk of that audience, call it 5%, I don't know, play and are excited about orcs in Warhammer 40,000. If I can find a way to reach those people, then I think if I can successfully reach that community in any meaningful way, then I have a much more successful campaign than if I don't. And I'm going to attack that mostly through like finding people who are making content and excited about orcs. And, my choice of miniature painter with $1 billion clown farm is definitely part of that. Um, but, if I can spend some money and I've got really crisp keyword targeting goals, like I can actually see, I can see why spending money in places that orc players are already going to be hanging out, like that makes some sense. Like that's it's a very, it's a very targeted, like
Mm.
coherent strategy, and that is, you know, that's quite unusual for a digital marketing campaign. Like normally you're like much more fluffy sort of personas of sort of people that you're trying to reach, or keyword clusters that you're trying to reach. But you know, in this case, I can fish for something quite specific. That will be true of other, you know, games and tabletop board games and stuff as well in some cases. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying I'm going to spend any money, but that's the reason I'm tempted.
yeah, I mean, I think it boils down to it's a risk reward equation to my mind.
Hmm.
You know, any money that you spend on advertising is money that you could just be losing money on. You know, you could lose a little bit of money on each dollar you spend, or you could just the whole thing could just disappear for really no return. And there are people who, having done it repeatedly and had like significant budgets, understand like the level of that risk and the likelihood of it going badly. I'm not comfortable to say that I'm enough of one of those people to put a significant money into that risk reward hopper.
Well, and this is the bugger of it, because like, how are you going to get that experience? It's losing lots of money. So,
Well, yes, by being
so it's just real
employed
hard. It's
by
real
being
hard.
employed by a company that has lots of that money that they can lose and not worry about it,
Yeah, that's true.
other
That's true.
people on staff who have been part of a chain of other people who knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
That is how you get that
yeah.
experience.
That's
And
how you learn, with other people's money.
if you have that in your life history, I'm jealous of the skill that you have acquired there, and you know have a marketable skill of your own, and you
You should
go
come on
out.
the podcast and tell us what to do.
Yeah, and you can go out and the other thing is I've listened to podcasts and videos of those people, and it very quickly gets to a bit where they are speaking another language as far as I'm concerned, of pixel tracking and like I say AB marketing and etc etc, and even the people who know what they're doing have to go through, like I say, the AB marketing process for several months and pump in a chunk of money each time, and they're like, okay, you know 6 months of like spending $1,000 a month, and we might get to a point where we've got something that's worth spending real money on. And it's like,
Mm.
no, that's more than my entire Kickstarter budget, because I'm not looking for, that sort of result. And it's like, yeah, I think it's like you decide which pond you want to swim in. And if you have if you have 10 or 20 grand, where not making that 10 or 20 grand back wouldn't cripple you, then go down the path of paid marketing and find those people and give them your money, and it will I reckon it will probably pay you back significantly. If you don't have that money, that's just not for you,
Mm.
dude, because that's like, you know, a lot of people who spend the 100 grand to enter the World Poker Tournament in Las Vegas end up with $10 million at the end of it. A lot of the people end up with none
Yeah.
of that money after.
So I think the other thing for me, and hearing you say that out loud is definitely helping me make this decision. Like, I have got so many unknowns about this Space Git Kickstarter. You know, just some of the fundamentals about how do I press the big green button, how do I get through the 30 days, and how do I get through the process of making the product and getting it into people's hands. That there's a lot of ways that money could accidentally fall out of my bank account in
Mm,
unexpected ways during that. You know, betting a bunch of coin on digital advertising is, you know, maybe something for a future campaign when I've got those other kind of basic things bedded in. So that's, I think that's helped me formulate an opinion of like, I probably will end up working with influencers. Whether I'll pay anyone, we shall see. But like, actually going into the deep ocean of, you know, paid advertising, digital advertising, display advertising, all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, that is maybe for campaign 2 or 3.
Yeah, like I've chucked out like 300, 500 quid here and there on Kickstarters doing advertising, and I can honestly say I do it fully thinking that this is 500 quid that I may as well be setting on fire. I do it because sometimes I do it because I like seeing my game being advertised on Board Game Geek. Sometimes because I'll stick an advert in a magazine that I actually like, and it's partly for me. I do not think
Oh,
that sort of
magazine advertising. That is futility.
it comes with a digital like thing on their website,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
etc.,
yeah, yeah.
etc., and whatnot. But
Oh
personally,
yeah, we should say that actually. If you live in a world where war games magazines are relevant to your Kickstarter, just email the magazines because they're magazines. They run to a tight monthly schedule. They're always desperate for content. They will possibly even pay you by the word, not very much, but if you offer to do it for free, like, they'll probably just bite your hand off. So, they aren't necessarily the most forward-looking media in terms of their like circulation and so forth, but like if you want to, magazines are definitely out, paper magazines are definitely out there, and you can get involved as an author of things. So it
yeah.
has been a while now, but like I used to do like launch articles and stuff for mini war games and war games illustrated and stuff. I haven't done one of those for a while, but yeah, that was always easy pickings.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've done articles for Tabletop Gaming Magazine and War Games Illustrated, and you can pretty much write them and say, "I'll do you a page on something in order to like get my name out there," and
Yeah, and it's not cynicism. They've just got like not very many staff writers and a lot of like, a lot of pages to fill.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, that is a thing you can do if you've got the time for it, and I think that's probably true for various websites. If
Mm.
you'll write them like 300, 500 words on your thing, and they can chew those words up and slap them on that. Digital digital websites have even they're paid even less money, have even more content they've got to pump out there than paper ones. So yeah, if there's a website that puts up reviews or whatever, you can totally write a review of your own game or a press release, whatever you want to call it, and
Mm.
give it them, and they'll stick it up there because they need to fill space, and they'll totally do that for free for you, in order to get like more content out.
Right,
Okay,
no.
I think that's our I mean, my position on paid advertising is probably don't. Unless you know that you are the person who can and should, then you are the person who can't and shouldn't. Is my
Mhm.
is my position on it. Um, be very afraid of anybody who asks you to spend money when your Kickstarter is running on advertising. They know how vulnerable you are, particularly the ones who come in and say, "I'll back your project at the top level to show good, good faith before you then give me 10 times the amount of money I just backed you for," because that's like, what do you think I am? Um, yeah, if you've seen like a paid advertising campaign, or if you've believed something was free and then found out that it had been paid for, and you have opinions about that having happened, why not swing down to the comment section and tell us about it? Because there's probably a couple of people with an opinion on paid advertising from influencers. I've encountered a few people with those opinions, and it's always worth kicking off in the comment section. But when you're down there, hit on the like and subscribes for us, and then check out the links section where there will be links to Space Gits and other projects. There will be links
Mhm.
to our Patreons where you can swing by and follow us. And then when we do things like Space Gits, you will be notified of it, and that will be ongoing into the future. For this video, will be perpetual in digital memory.
Yep.
There will be a link to our Discord where you can swing over and ask us for details about numbers and companies and people, and we'll give them to you because it will be slightly more private. And our websites where you can run along and buy various products that we make, and we'll give you great joy and happiness. But for now, I think from this episode of Rule of Carnage, it'll probably be a thank you and goodbye. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks. Goodbye. And don't send us emails to ask if we'll advertise your game. We're much too lazy. Bye bye.
Bye bye.